Thank you, Alison. It's very interesting to think about, this new skill that children have to acquire, which is making new correspondences between sounds and graphemes and the text. And the fact that this invariably leads to some mispronunciation. I mean, those children where, are still learning, some of them, to secure those correspondences in their first language. And that can mean that they mispronounce words in the second language. And this topic was mentioned by many of you, but most of you weren't actually too worried about mispronunciation. For example, Lisa felt that it was less of a concern because she's noted that children can actually echo back words correctly. So they hear the words correctly and they can mimic the pronunciation correctly. She also notes that learners can hear differences in sounds and produce different sounds. But what she does is she looks for consistent or persistent errors, and that when these occur, she corrects them. So this is a big step for learning these sound spelling links. Children need to have a secure basis of sounds to link with spelling, so actually recognizing the sounds and hearing them and being able to mimic them correctly is very important. But then they have to establish new correspondences. And that's what differentiates foreign language learners from the learning phonics in your native language, for example. So the first language learners have secure phonological representations, so they know the sounds well. They've been using them for a long time. And we'd agree with Lisa that mispronunciation will and do occur, and that this takes time to resolve. So lots of stage interventions might be necessary. There isn't much literature about how young children learn new foreign language sounds, but studies with adults show mixed results. Some that different sounds from the L1 are easier, so sounds in the L2 that are different from the L1 are easier. Others that actually different sounds are harder, and it seems to depend on what the actual sound is and how difficult it might be to hear and to pronounce. So, these new correspondences take time to acquire, and that's what is important to remember when thinking about mispronunciation. I'll hand over to Alison now, who's going to comment further on on mispronunciation.
Okay, so I'd agree with you, Florence, there. I think you've made some very good points about how not to be too concerned about mispronunciation, and about how the competition with the kind of entrenched first language knowledge. Thinking about learning of sound spelling links in particularly, Joanna mentioned that early foreign language phonics, I should say, could confuse learners who are in the process of learning or have just secured first language phonics. This is a really valid and interesting concern, and it's one that I've heard a lot. And there's no real research with foreign language learners to know whether for sure this will be an issue or not. But research does tell us a bit about kind of these beginning foundational literacy skills. So it does suggest that practicing what we call sublexical skills in additional languages could be valuable, as this is a skill which seems to transfer across languages. So, for example, there was a study in primary schools in England where the learners were taught French and Italian and did some sound work in French and Italian, and they found that their ability to segment sounds into syllables or to onset and to set words, into syllables or onset rhyme, so phonological awareness, in other words, that ability in English was enhanced through having had this experience with French and Italian and learning French and Italian in the classroom. So we know that phonological awareness, that kind of foundational literacy skill, which we have to develop in order to be able to match letters and the written word with sounds, seems to develop in alphabetic languages, even those with different scripts. So we know that Arabic first language speakers seem to be able to transfer this idea about phonological awareness to other languages. And also, interestingly, Chinese learners, if they've been taught Pinyin, which is the alphabetic version of Chinese, then they develop phonological awareness in the same way that a child who's learned English to read in English as a first language and who speaks English as a first language will develop phonological awareness. But when we think about actual phonics, the learning of sound spelling links and vice versa, the feeling is currently that confusion would be unlikely. Why is that? Think about when children learn to read in their first language. Think about how much teaching and practicing and reading and environmental print goes into them developing that understanding about the links between sounds and letters. On the other hand, you might be teaching foreign language phonics for what, 10 minutes a week, 20 minutes a week. So it seems unlikely that those kinds of sound spelling links are going to offer real competition to developing or developed first language sound spelling links, which are practiced far more frequently and encountered far more frequently inside school, but also outside school. I mean, interestingly, another piece of research does show that children, depending on their first language, develop word recognition skills that they prefer to use. So very briefly, if children speak Spanish as a first language and have learned to read in Spanish, then they will prefer decoding as a word recognition tool, if you like, when they're learning to read in another language. Children who've learned English will use decoding, but they will use other word recognition strategies too, because they'll have learned from their experience with English, i.e. the hard way, that phonics doesn't always work. It doesn't always help them decode the written word. Maite, Siobhan and Judith mentioned that it's hard to find foreign language texts which practice phonics, and we'd agree here. And this is a really important point, because part of phonics instruction, as we've argued, needs to be opportunities to decode and read aloud and try to apply this knowledge that children are learning. And you can focus on isolated words in an authentic text, but it doesn't provide you with the consistency to practice particular sound spelling links. We're not aware, to be honest, of any commercial resources developed for this purpose, although the study that Florence mentioned right at the beginning of this weekly review has developed some texts for older secondary school learners aged 11 to 13, where particular sound spelling links are practiced, and as part of the phonics instruction, teachers used poems or short rhymes to practice the sound spelling links too. Liz mentioned that some teachers won't be familiar with phonics instruction, and Jacopo and Daniela suggested asking to work alongside teachers who are engaged in first language literacy instruction. This seems like a really valuable suggestion for those who aren't familiar with teaching first language literacy, not just for phonics instruction actually, but we'd suggest watch how teachers engage children in reading strategy use, such as inferencing and prediction in first language literacy classes, because those tools will likely be helpful in a foreign language classroom. So we've had lots of resources and practical suggestions this week, as usual, which is just fantastic. There's lots of activity on the Padlet walls from the innovator tasks for each week. I'd just like to remind you to save the links to the Padlet walls, because the Padlet walls will remain open after the MOOC has closed. So you can access those resources and those suggestions from your fellow participants going forward, so way beyond the course of this MOOC. Florence, you wanted to say something.
Yes, so I want to thank you all for participating in this MOOC, and it's been very interesting for us. We really enjoyed putting it together, and putting together in particular, a very direct link between research and practice. So why some practice works and others doesn't, maybe on the basis of what we understand about how children learn. So we've really enjoyed doing this, and we've been very stimulated by all your comments and the amount of interaction with you. So that's been really great. One plea from us, please fill in the questionnaires at the end of each session. For us to carry on doing this work, we need to demonstrate to our institutions that our work matters, that it's people are interested in it. So it's very important, for example, for us to carry on the work of Ripple, that you do fill in the questionnaires, and we can show that, yes, you've taken notice and that you've enjoyed the course or not, as the case may be, and that you found it useful for your practice. So I think it remains for us all to thank you very much for participating, and we really hope you've enjoyed it. But your comments seem to suggest that you have found something in it, which is great. And stay safe and keep well, and we hope to see you again in the future. The MOOC will be running again in early October and then in the new year. So some of you who might not have been able to look at all the sessions might want to join us again then. So it's a bye from us, and hope to see you soon again.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and stay safe and well.
Bye.
Bye.